Don't look very nice.
Do you think this is a nice plant shelf? It's quite cheap. And its full intention is for plants. It's got like holes in it.
Yeah, it's nice.
Mm. So how do I join it?
Did I send you the link already?
You sent me something. I don't know if it was a link.
Don't forget I'm on Zoom now.
Right now?
Yeah.
Oh, so I can't talk?
Only Andrew's joined, but
Mm.
just so you know, I'm muted. Just recording. Did everyone get that recording message? Yeah. Okay, cool. So welcome to the first DUELS networking event. I'm Carrington and my fellow execs are here, Miriam, the secretary, and Drew, the treasurer. And we've got Wade here, and Miriam's actually organised this for us, so I'll pass over to her to introduce Wade.
Hi everyone, like she said, I'm Miriam. There's going to be an echo here because Wade's just in the next room. But yes. Thanks. It's not going to shut. So we've got Wade here to talk about his business, which he will go into detail. I'm not going to give anything away. But you would have seen something on either Facebook or the website or Insta, something like that. And he's just going to take us through the process of his career and how he got into the business and what it's all about. And it should be really good. So we will pass over to Wade when he's ready. And if you're comfortable, it'd be good to have cameras on just so it looks like we're talking to people.
Can you start video? G'day everyone. All right.
Hello.
Your guys' cues as to what I'm supposed to do and when I talk and stuff.
Okay, well, we can pass over to you. Do you have those slides to share?
Sure, I'm happy to talk whenever you want. And do you want to tell me how long you'd like me to talk for?
Maybe half an hour would be good. Maybe just talk about how you got into what you're doing, you know, how you do it, maybe about publishing as well, like how you found support for what you wanted to do, and maybe even the business running side of things a little bit.
Cool. Okay, so I can do a quick, I'll do a half an hour chat through what I do, how I got into it. And I had a couple of slides on doing world building and stuff like that. But quickly, I guess I'll touch on what I do. So I create role-playing games. So if any of you guys ever done like Dungeons and Dragons is the big one. It's super nerdy and very niche, but the internet is fantastic for niche. So you can have like a tiny fraction percentage of the population, but that tiny fraction across the world, that's enough to make a living. And I've been doing this full time for 6 years. So the sort of books I do is like this one here, and just full of like lots of stories and artwork and lots and lots and lots of world building. That's principally what I do. How I got into this. So previously I worked as a graphic designer, and I was creating this book as just sort of a healthy side project. I didn't want to spend all my time, playing computer games and doing different things. So I thought I want something healthy I can do in my spare time. And I really liked that stuff. And I'd worked on some previous photography books and a few other different projects. And I always liked books. I love reading. I love RPGs and all that sort of stuff. And so I had this book, and I thought, so Kickstarter, which is a crowdfunding program where basically people you put a project up on the internet, and if people like it, they can pre-order it. And if it's successful, then you get funded and you go do it. And that came to Australia. And my thoughts was, I basically was going to be a vanity project. I thought, I'll make this book. I'll do the best I can. I may not make money from it, but when I'm an old man, I'll be able to point to the bookshelf and go, I made that book there, and that's pretty much what I wanted. And then I put up on Kickstarter for $15,000 because I thought that's the minimum that I needed to do a print run. I thought, I'll probably lose a bit of money on that, but I don't care. But then I raised over $100,000. It turned out to be, my ideas that I had was a lot more popular than I expected. And then I effectively fired myself from my old job and got myself a new job. And so I've been doing that for about 6 years now. My primary book that I do is a science fiction called Fragged Empire. But then I've got a bunch of other ones, but my other main ones is I've got a fantasy one and a gothic horror one. And I pretty much, I like doing this stuff because I really like creating. I like coming up with ideas. What if? I'm really, really passionate about world building. And these books, these games are largely about, I'm trying to think the best way to explain it. It's kind of like you're creating a world which other people can then make characters to play in and tell their stories. So it's not like a classic sort of way I write about a protagonist and an antagonist going through a story. The stuff that I do is primarily about creating a world for other people to tell stories in, is to provide logs to provide logs and creative fuel for other people's fire, so to speak. And that's how I think about it. So that pretty much covers what I do and how I got into it. And should I jump into some of my world building stuff at the moment?
Sounds good.
Okay, I'll jump into it. Okay, let's see if I can get this slide thing happening.
You know how to share your screen?
Yeah, we will figure this one out. Okay. Yeah. Okay. There we go. Cool. Okay. Okay. So this was just like sort of showing what I do. So you can see Fragged Empire, that's my main book. And people have sort of seen some of the pop cultural ideas of what a role-playing game is. I mean, they're always a little bit different from reality, but you're seeing that in Stranger Things and in Communities, very good TV shows, which has inspired this stuff. Yeah. Okay. And so this is a lot of So I mean, I've just put up the artwork there just because it makes more visual than writing a big block of text. So yeah, so a lot of it's like doing world building is sort of maps and factions and language and culture and history, and getting all these different sort of ideas and how they mingle in together. Okay. So I think everybody here kind of gets an idea of what world building is. It's not a very hard concept, but yeah. So two of my favorite world builders is Frank Herbert, who created the Dune series, and Tolkien is probably the master of world building, who made Lord of the Rings. I might argue that Dune is possibly more fantasy than science fiction, but I tried to pick a good sci-fi one. So Tolkien is a particularly interesting person, in that he was I believe he's a linguist, a literary professor who got very, very carried away with his world building, is the only way I would describe it. And this is just my own ideas, but I kind of like to think that Tolkien made a world first, and then accidentally sort of a story came out of it. And one of the greatest achievements from his world building, which he did, in my opinion, is he created the Elven language. So when you create a fictional language, it's called conlanging. And from that, the way that he thought about that, though, was so interesting, in that he didn't just come up with sort of sentence structures and how letters were used, but he also thought about how different ideas and philosophical concepts from this fictional species then informed their language, but then how that language then informed back to the species. And he dived so deeply into this idea and exploring the different concepts that came out of this, that it informed a huge amount of his world. So, like, for example, the language that was written on the One Ring was, supposed to be the Mordor script. That comes from Elven, is like a corrupted form of it. And then he, explored lots and lots of stuff like that. Frank Herbert, I think one of the greatest things that he did is exploring the idea of there is no perfect leader. So in his books, you've got these different types of leaders. You've got the really charismatic ones, the one that appeals to Harkonnens, who very much appeal to the basic instincts of their people and run through fear. And then he sort of explores this idea about how people desire and want and expect a leader, and then how that informs and shapes their culture and their community, and how people form around that. But then also the type of leader, and how then that goes back the other way, how that also informs the people under it. And having these big core underpinning ideas in a fictional world, they add depth to a story and a character. So I'll go back to my previous slide, is to thinking about world building, is that think about like creating not just like a world, making everything make sense, but it can also add depth, which then can draw people in by adding additional layers to it. And if you look at both of these people's work, they did mountains of world building that is not actually within the books that they did, although Herbert went on and wrote additional books where he kept exploring these ideas. And then Tolkien, he wrote the Silmarillion, which is almost unreadable, but it shows how much he thought about this stuff and adds so much more to it, which makes it, in my opinion, like it's a good read from an intellectual point of view. Yeah. Okay. So moving forward. So with my work that I do, So with world building, you can grab onto anything, okay? And if you were to create an entire fictional universe or a setting or a world of which to tell your story in, it would be too much. And so often I encourage people, and this is, maybe I'll just describe my approach. I think other people do much better work than me, but my approach is sort of to grab the key points which I think have the most resonance to them. And so when I was creating my fictional science fiction setting, it was a lot of like spaceships and aliens and war and, that sort of aliens and stuff like that. But then as I wrote that out, I found sort of the nugget. And I think that in my work is my exploration of nature versus nurture. And so my science fiction book, particularly is my main one, it dives into that really deeply. And that when we think about nature versus nurture, not just in terms of people. So for example, at its basis is just like genetics versus culture, like who your parents are. And that's what leads to the creation and formation of a person, but also thinking about the nature and the nurture of nations and history. So in terms of geography, resources, and the different forces that pull on stuff, and that what shapes how things come out. And because my work that I do is not about telling a particular story with characters, it's creating a world for other people to inhabit. The big thing that I do is to propose a large number of questions that are not fully explored, okay? So even though I explore nature versus nurture in my settings, I try not to jump, I try not to give an answer, because sometimes I find that answers are far less interesting than the question themselves. And it's not saying you don't answer anything, but having some unanswered stuff is always a good idea, in my opinion. Okay, so this is just like a very tiny slice about how you can sort of explore some of this stuff. And so this is my approach. Okay, so for example, you have real history in terms of like, so in my story, there was a big war, okay? But then the people within the setting, the key point is not actually what actually happened necessarily, but how they perceive that war and how they perceived how it started, how they perceive it ended, and how they perceive it panned out. And then that informs their sensitivities and fears and expectations of a people, because these are like these big lessons that they've grown up with. And then that shapes their ideologies, and then that comes out and shape politics and education, entertainment, which also can feed back into, get sort of a reverse loop back into ideologies. And then the same sort of stuff, environment informs resources, which then informs technology and economies that come out of that. So, and you can go on and on with this stuff, like it just, and I encourage writers to think about this stuff, even though not all of it's going to be in what you write, okay? So for example, some of the best world builders have thought about all of this stuff, and they've probably got novels worth of ideas of exploring this sort of the different forces that at work in terms of their world, but they tell it from the character's perspective, if that's, I'm trying to think how to explain it. Okay, so let's say within a fictional world, you've got, and you're exploring, you've mapped out the resources. So let's say this nation, it is in this place of the continent, which makes the weather like this. They've got neighbors like this, which informs their trade, and that informs the resources. So, okay, let's say because of this, they're a large amount of cattle, and then that means, okay, they've got lots of meat and leather, and that informs sort of how the people dress, the sort of merchants and stuff like that there that work. And and then you get different houses or factions, whatever, sort of growing up around, or guilds growing up around these different economies. And you may have all of that mapped out, okay, in your head or written down, but that doesn't necessarily mean it goes into the book, because you've got to grab the best bits and put them into your stories. But having all of the stuff that's underneath the ground, the foundation, even though you can't see it, it helps to add that extra layer of integrity and depth and coherency that then makes your work much more interesting. Yeah. Okay, so this is probably one of the bigger points I'm thinking about how to go about making a fictional world. And this is just my approach. So because you can do anything. And I think sometimes people say they want stuff to be really original, okay? They're always like, oh, there's no new books, or these ideas are just boring. These movies that are coming out, they're all the same. And they say they want weird ideas, okay? But the problem is that if you make stuff too weird, too unique, it becomes so obtuse and you can't digest it. You're going to find a very small percentage, tiny fraction of the population is going to be able to digest stuff if it's just too strange. And so the way that I think about putting together stuff is to make a, particularly in the areas of fiction, more digestible. And this is just my approach. Everyone has a different approach. Is I go for a thirds rule. So third based on reality, a third based on sort of tropes or expected or the norm, and then a third original, okay? If you make stuff too much reality, then it becomes historical or scientific documentation, which is fine if you want to go for that, but that's not quite what I'm going for. If you go for stuff that's too tropey, then it just feels derivative. It feels like you're just rehashing stuff that already exists. And so it feels like you're copying. It feels very bland. And then, as I covered on before, if you make stuff too original, then it becomes undigestible. And so I think about it in a bit like how you have a story slowly leads a person in. So you start off with character that's very understandable. And then as the story progresses, you're slowly adding a little bit more depth, you're mixing in there. And I think about the same thing with a world, is you want somewhere where people can start with and understand. And often this is just, humans on Earth doing their thing, and everyone's like, okay, I get that. And then slowly you might add weird technology that's sort of not too weird, and then maybe one really strange technology, and then aliens, or sort of add that layers of depth, and slowly you can sort of spiral out to more originality. And also, as people become more accustomed, more familiar
I think Wade's frozen. It's been like 10 seconds.
Oh, I think I'm back. Am I back?
Yeah, you're back. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know whether how much people missed. That's all right. I'm kind of just.
It was about 10 seconds.
Okay. Cool. Okay, so I'm smashing through my my material way quicker than I was expecting, but I kind of thought that might happen. Okay. Anyway, just to summarize up the idea of drawing people into a world, it's just start with something that's digestible, and then slowly add layers of complexity and detail and originality as you go in, and then as people become more familiar with a work. So let's say they've read the first book, and the second book can be more original and more deeper. And this Look, this is just my approach. I'm not going to say it should be like this. I think there's room in the market for stuff that is much more original, but then there's also stuff that's like really historical based. There's all sorts of tastes out there. But purely from like an economic business perspective, you still need to have stuff that's sort of, you want to appeal to lots of people. But then like if you appeal to too wide an audience, then it ends up being bland. But then if you make it, if you appeal to too small of an audience, then you're not going to be able to sell enough work to continue doing it. So you kind of need to figure out like, what is your story aimed at? What is the story you want to tell that that's interesting and true enough so as that you can remain motivated and excited by the project? Because if you're not motivated or excited by your own work, you're not going to finish. You know, you'll burn out. But then, you know, that's the business side of stuff. Okay. So continue on from the chat here. Would you like me to run through some of the worlds that I've made to sort of give people a slice of what I do? Would that be the best way forward?
Yeah, that sounds good. Did anyone have any questions like for Wade at this point? I'll just give them a second to chat to see if anyone asks anything. Or you can use your mic. Oh, we got one. What does your team look like? Who do you need to work with to get to the final published product?
Okay, that's a good question. So it's changed over the period of my business, but right at the moment, I've got 2 writers with me and three artists that work with me. So, and this is, I understand that my sort of project is different from a lot of people who are working on stuff. So I have, and I think so the writers that I've got, so I've got one writer who's just really, really good at stories, very just great at writing about people that feel like people and are easy to like, excellent at protagonists. He's really, really good at writing characters that people like. He's not the best at writing villains that you hate, but really, really good at writing about people that you like. So he does a lot of some intro short stories, in the introduction short stories to some of my books. And then I've got another writer who is he's of good quality, but he's a little slow just because he's doing a lot of other work and stuff like that. But he's good. So I kind of get him to do some of my filler text around the side sort of stuff. So at the moment he's writing about planets and things, and he does good work. And then at the moment I'm doing a lot of the world building writing is what I'm doing. And then in terms of artists, so I've got, so I do all the graphic design. So all the maps and the icons and the book layout, I do all of that, which is really good because hiring graphic designers can be very expensive. So I'm very happy I get to do that myself. It saves me a bucket load. And then I've got, I've worked with artists. I've worked with ones all over the world. So my lead artist is a fellow from Mexico. I've also got another Polish artist, a Russian artist. But just from all over the place. The internet is really good for finding people. And a big part of what I do, I'm actually doing a lot more writing these days, which I'm pretty excited about. But in the past, much more, I felt like an art director. So getting all different people to work together to sort of put these different projects together. Because I also produce a lot of books. So, I mean, I just released 3 new books at the moment. So that was, and they took about a year and a half to make all 3 of those, it was a lot of work. In terms of publishing, I'm self-published. And the reason I do that is because I do it through Kickstarter. Kickstarter is really big for me. If I sell a book through a publisher, which I do, I've got a publisher over in the UK. I get such a tiny percentage from each book sale, but if I can sell directly straight to somebody, that's like the equivalent of easily 15 sales through a publisher in terms of profit difference. And I know people I think, oh, profit money. Blah, blah. The way I think about money is just resources. It's just resources that I can then put into the book, keep life going, pay my bills so I can keep doing this. And so that is important to factor in. And I do think that the whole self-publishing thing works particularly well for my market. I'm not so sure about other markets, but you know, you always hear about success stories, but you also hear about things that don't go ahead. Yeah. All right. I hope that answered the question. Yeah.
Yeah, that was good. We had another one, 2 more. Is it a competitive industry to be in?
Oh, sorry. I had a follow-up question in regards to what you just said, Wade. Is that all right?
Yeah. Well, let's do the follow-up question first.
Yeah, cool. You mentioned that you're self-published and you didn't go through a publisher. Were you worried that being self-published, you would have less exposure than going through a publisher?
Okay, so this one really bluntly, I don't think there's any other way to do it. So publishers, particularly in my industry, often have their own projects. So for example, the publisher that I work with from the UK is lovely and has done great work for me. They have their own books that they in-house have produced. And therefore, they prioritize their own products when they're doing marketing and sales, okay? Because if they sell one of their own products, that's a much larger profit for them than if they sell my product. And while they are useful for getting some exposure, in my field, not particularly. And yeah, I think I do a lot more exposure than they could offer me, which is fine. And I'm not against them. I mean, it makes sense for them. They've got dozens of employees they need to pay and all that sort of stuff. So yeah. I hope that answered your question. I think if I found a publisher who didn't have their own product and they were really good and competent, that'd be great. And I'd probably go with them. But if they're really good and competent, it's probably not long before they get their own product. Because if they're really good at what they do, they'd probably just say, well, how about we just buy a product and we'll do it ourselves? And yeah. Okay, sorry, what was the next?
I had another follow-up question as well, sorry.
Oh, sorry, another follow-up, yep.
When you say you self-publish some of them, can you just give us like, in a nutshell, like steps on like what you do to go about that?
Sure, okay, so it's pretty simple. Crowdfunding is just this field. So I put the project up, Kickstarter, I run a campaign for a month, and then I get a certain amount of orders from that. And that number of orders helps me to know how many I need to get printed, okay? So let's say I get 900 people back my Kickstarter. I might, if I'm feeling good, I'll order sort of double that. If I'm not feeling quite so good about the product, I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'll just pad it out by an extra 50% on top of that. And this is just me. If I was better at numbers, I could probably have a much more accurate number about how many I should order. But anyway, so once that's done, I order the books. I've got warehouses, and there's lots of good warehouses, especially with that specifically deal with crowdfunding. So I've got a warehouse in the US and in the UK, and then my shed at home. And I send that off to the factory in China. China sends proof back. Got a very good factory over there. I even had my brother who was living over there go talk to them and visit them. And I've talked to some other people that they published. I talked to other publishers before I first went with them to get a feel for them. And they're really good. They do excellent work. And I say, here's the numbers I want. here's my files, send this many to US, this many UK, this many to Australia. They send it off, I pay giant invoices. And then I fulfill out to my Kickstarter backers, send them out. And then I have extras that then I pass on to publishers and wholesalers. So I have a big bunch of wholesalers and I will talk to them. I'll say, hey, here's my new book that I've got. And I send them a thing called a sale sheet, which is a 1-page summary of my book. I put some nice sexy pictures on there. It's called the point of sale. So it's the stuff that makes them like sort of, here's what makes this product special, and one little short paragraph summary of it, and then a price. And I send that off to them. And they'll be like, yep, send me a few boxes. They'll test it out. And if it sells well, they'll say, oh, send me some more. And although with some publishers that I've got a good long-lasting agreement with, I will send them a bunch and we'll work on commission. So I only get money as per they sell. Yeah, and I have a giant Excel sheet on my computer where I just list publishers and wholesalers and I send them emails. You got to get into a little bit of the marketing hustle, which is if you're self-publishing, you're effectively, you're a business, you've got a business. Yeah. Cool.
Thanks, that makes a lot of sense. Then we got, is it a competitive industry to be in?
Yeah, so my industry is really, really competitive. The reason for this is sort of twofold. One is because the barriers to entry are very low. And I think this is across all literary fields at the moment because of digital, because people buy PDFs or ebook versions of your books. So therefore the ease of create a thing, pay someone a couple $100, they turn it into a little file. Mind you, I do that myself, so I don't need to pay anyone. And then you upload it to certain websites. Like if you're writing a normal novel, Amazon's a big one, although the percentages they give you are very, very tiny. So maybe don't go with Amazon. But anyway, so you've got that low sort of barrier to entry. So that means you've got lots and lots and lots out there in the market, lots of indie stuff, which I like. I like that. Okay. And in my industry, the other reason is not just a low barrier entry. You have a very large number of, we would call them enthusiasts, which is what I was when I started off, people who are just like, well, I've been running this RPG game with my friends and I for years and years, and I want to write it up and pay an artist and I'll turn it into a thing. Okay. And then I'm going to sell it for $1.50, So they're not looking to make money from it. They've just made this passion thing and they just want to get it out there. And that is direct competition with me. Okay. So I've got to sell enough to cover all my writers and artists and time and stuff like that. So I can't sell it for $1.50. I have to sell it for more. And so I am competing with them, and that's fine. That stuff is good. I actually really like there being more stuff out there just because I find it's interesting. And sometimes there are some real diamonds in the rough that would never have found an audience if there wasn't such low barriers to entry and if people weren't passionate about their ideas. So it's pretty competitive, but I figured out how to make, I think the key for me is, I would say, despite being an indie person, an indie designer, my stuff stands out in my field because I'm different. And the things that make me different is most people who move into my field are writer backgrounds. So they're really, really good with words and prose and stuff like that. Whereas my background is graphic design. And what this means is that my work is really visually very good compared to most of my competition. Whereas the writing for me is very difficult because I'm not a natural writer. I love reading. I've read my entire life. But that stuff's tough for me. But because my visuals are very good, I found that my rules, because, you know, we're rolling dice, so we're making maths and, you know, doing game side of it, that's also quite solid. And over the years, I've gotten better at the actual writing stuff. And that's helped me stand out in my field. So I guess that's what I would say to anybody else who is doing something in my field is find the thing that makes you good and makes you distinctive. You've got to have something, whether it's some idea, a certain combination of skills. Another skill set that I've got is I really like people. Like I love talking to people. I love like going to conventions, chatting to people, just being, I'm not just pretending, I generally like people and I'm generally very interested in people. And I like working with people, and that's been very helpful as well. And that's something that I've got that helped me sort of find my place as well. So I find the thing that makes you special and have an honest, clear idea about your strengths and weaknesses will help you to know, okay, what do I need to struggle through and what is my good selling points? Yeah, hopefully that answered the question, but yeah. Cool.
Yeah, that was good. And we got 2 more questions. Sorry. We've got, do you have a main social media platform you use for marketing and outreach?
Yeah, okay. So everyone likes to talk about social media these days, which makes sense. It's kind of the way people get out there. Look, I primarily use Facebook, Twitter, and Discord. And I have mixed feelings on social media. So I've tried all different ones. Look, I think Facebook used to be a lot better than it is now. It's just a changing platform. It's quite good for reaching my 25 and year older sort of population, not so good with reaching out to younger people. Facebook's algorithms are becoming increasingly tiresome and difficult to work with. Look, I can gripe about Facebook a lot, but mostly the reason I'm griping is because Facebook used to be really good. It used to be really cost efficient. It used to be very effective at reaching people. Now it's becoming difficult, but I've got to, you know, I've got 800 people who will generally see my posts and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, that's a slice, okay? And I don't expect these people to be interacting and seeing my my stuff from other platforms, so that's fine. Twitter is a big one if you can really find your place on it. I'm still figuring out Twitter. It seems okay. I see other people be really successful on there, so that's kind of motivating me to continue to try at it. I haven't been at it for too long, but it's okay. The big one, this was very surprising for me. The big platform that I find is one of my most effective ones is Discord, which is so weird because it's like this chat voice computer gamey thing. And I found it like every day I jump on there and talk to my community and they're very engaged. It's excellent for getting play testers and people sharing their ideas with each other. So that one's been a real surprise win for me. I'm not sure in terms of number of people have reached on, interactivity is very high. And so, yeah, whereas, and which you need that. I need that interactivity with to build a community. The big one for me in terms of, and this is not social media, in terms of connecting with people and telling them when I'm doing it. For example, when I'm doing a new Kickstarter, the #1 most effective way for me to tell people that I'm doing it and get the news out there is a mailing list. So I use a program called MailChimp and I just get people to sign up. And I only ever email them when I tell them, I'm very clear. I say, I'm only going to email you when I do a new book. I don't do weekly annoying stuff or And I found that that's the number one way of reaching people, because people are like, oh yeah, I like Fragged, but I don't want to stay up to date with it. Just tell me once every year when you're doing a new thing. Like that's all they want, which is fine. And so mailing list has been the best way for that, which seems so archaic, but yeah. Cool. Okay. What's the next question?
We got one more question at the moment. It's from the Deacon Tabletop Society. They said, how do you handle balancing what you want to write and what you believe your fans want to be added to the world?
I'll be very blunt. I just do what I like. I don't like, I think fans, okay, so the joy about role-playing games is if people feel like something should be different, I pretty much say, that's great. You do that. Go do that for your own game. And I'm very supportive of that. But I'm very much, this is my baby. I think about this more than anybody else has ever thought about it. Every idea about what if or this should be different, I've already thought about it 10 times. And this comes back to the world building thing. People say, why shouldn't this be different? And I've got ideas that I haven't necessarily written, but I've got this sort of behind the scenes ideas about the coherency of what's going on behind there. So yeah, I do that. But actually, I will say one thing where I do listen to the audience though. And I think that's to do with game balance. So this is the other side. That makes sense, for instance, from the tabletop people, less than the writers, is playtest feedback in terms of just getting the flow of a game session right. Getting that feedback is really important. So in that regard, I do listen to people, and I love my power gamers. I love my super opinionated nerds. I want all their stuff, you know. I want them to send me their maths equations as to why this chart is wrong, or why damage is too much here, or this doesn't feel right and this balances with this one weird. I want all that. And I kind of, in that regard, I kind of absorb it all. But I do find that my audience is not necessarily the best at coming up with answers, but they're very good at picking things when they don't work. And then I will go away and come up with a solution and then present it to them. So in that regard, yes, I do listen to people, but the world building, kind of do my own thing. Yeah.
Okay, did that answer your question, guys? Yep, they said yep. Cool. Did you want to show us a bit more about your actual games?
Sure, I can show you some of the stuff that I work. How are we going for time? I don't want to run over all.
I think we're going all right. Everyone seems to be interested.
Okay. Oh, okay. So we don't have an end time. We'll just talk until Wade gets boring. Okay.
That sounds good.
Okay. Well, how about I go for like another 10 minutes? Does that work for you?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Cool. Okay. Okay. So I'll just, you know, I wish I had some slides for some of this stuff, but I'll start with my my sci-fi. So this is the latest book that I did. So this one is Rachel Swagger's Guide to Mishpasha. So Rachel, which is this character here, is sort of not the focus, but she's, you know, my sort of poster child for my game. Anyway, so I'll give a little pitch about my story. Okay, so my science fiction world is set tens of thousands of years into the future, and humanity has died out due to genetic erosion, which is a lack of biodiversity within the genome. But humanity knew they were dying out. And so in their sort of final stages of existing, after spreading out throughout the galaxy, they genetically engineered a new species to replace them called the Archons. And the Archons are, you know, Dr. Manhattan, big, muscly, and colored skin, and very smart and strong and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, so the last humans died out and the Archons inherited the keys to their empire. But the Archons didn't want to walk in the footsteps of their creators. Instead, they became obsessed with the nature of their own creation. So they really doubled down on genetic engineering. And so they started to create all different species in the attempt to create the perfect species. But the Archons were terrible parents. They would heap their love and their praise upon some and neglect and reject others. And eventually, the Archons thought they'd create the perfect species called the Exion. And they just made 12 of them in a laboratory, and they heaped their love and their praise upon them. But then they started to argue amongst themselves, what is perfect? And they disagreed, and they withdrew the title of perfection from the Exion. The Exion didn't like this, and a fight broke out. Archons killed all of the Exions except for one, which stole a spaceship. Oh, I'm kind of having some internet issues. Wait, I think I'm good. Okay. And so this one Exion grabbed a spaceship, flew off into uncharted space. But 200 years later, the Exion returned. And it brought with it a big, massive army of genetically engineered monsters called the Nephilim. And they waged war on the Archons and all of their children and killed all of the Archons. But once the last Archon was dead, the Exion just left, abandoning its own creation. And my game starts 100 years after this war. And the survivors are just now starting to re-emerge back into space and just now reconnecting with each other. So it's got a kind of a dawn of a new age feel to it. And there's all different, different sorts of species that the people can play in the game. And that's when you take your story to go out there and explore what's out there, who are the new people, how are these people going to get along? There's all sorts of cultural tensions there. So anyway, so that's my sci-fi game in a super short, tiny, boiled down nutshell. See if I can grab. We won't actually, I won't do, so this is my fantasy game. I won't run into the full one of this one. But the short little sales pitch of this one is that this one is technically set within the same universe as my scientific, but it's on a remote planet where people have technologically devolved back to sort of a medieval sort of stage. So it's much more classic fantasy in terms of knights and bows and dragons and stuff like that. But with the sort of the spin on it is exploring the different species that I have in my main sci-fi, but from a different angle. And it's kind of they've like magic for this is ancient technology. They've forgotten how it works. Therefore, they think they might be like casting a fireball spell, but they're actually like throwing a potion of rocket fuel, and they've mythologized characters in the past. So, for example, their god of magic and metal is called Pole, and he's basically was a giant robot, but he died, and they're harvesting his body for magic bits. So anyway, that's kind of that one there. I won't go into that one too much. And the other one I've got is this is called Eternum. This is my gothic horror game. So I've got a bit of a particular pride in this book here. So one thing about me. So I'm a Christian, and one of the things that I wanted to explore was how would a Christian go about writing a horror story? It's not normally the thing that would connect. Okay. And as part of my Christian belief is that I do really like exploring the different elements of human experience, and fear and tension and dread are within that, even though I think there's an old saying that says that think about all human emotions and experiences on a piano. There's a time for everyone to be played. And those keystrokes are some rarer ones that come up within the culture that I grew up in. And so I want to explore that. And so I'm particularly fond of these books for that reason. But anyway, that's just a bit more of a me in my head thing than necessarily explaining the world. But I'll give you the quick rundown. So in Eternum is a endless city, very Victorian Gothic sort of thing. And this city goes on forever in every direction. And when a building in this city collapses, a celestial entity turns up and puts a new building in its place. So not only does the city go on forever, it's also built on top of the ruins of the old city. So it goes up and up and up and up and up, layers upon layers. But these celestial entities don't always build what you want. So let's say a manor house has just sort of fallen to ruin and collapsed. They might decide to build a windmill there, or a bridge, or a statue. Okay, so you end up with a very chaotic city with all different sorts of stuff all over the place. And another key feature about this world is that when a person dies, you can see their soul leave their body, and it either goes up or down. Okay, so there's, and the people that play this game, you play as a character called a tethered. And these tethered are kind of like Gothic horror superheroes. Okay, they're very powerful individuals. But what they've done is they've linked their soul to the now. So when they die, they come back to life. So they're immortal. And as you can pick up, that's another big theme of this world, is everything is forever. The people who you play in it live forever, but you're fighting these creatures called fiends. Anyway, they're like big monstery type things. Anyway, that's really short. I did a horrible job at explaining that one. But yeah, anyway, so those are my three primary IPs. Yeah, did anybody have any questions for that, or are we going from there?
I had a question actually.
Mm-hmm.
Is it hard for you to how do you go about switching genres so dramatically? Like, it's a whole different style. How do you research that?
Yeah. So I think for me, and this is probably something that everybody needs to figure out for themselves, as to how their creative process works. So I think for me, science fiction has kind of been a love of mine for a long time. But occasionally I get bored of it. I want something different. And I think that's kind of part of what motivated me to do different genres, is I just needed something fresh, and doing something fresh that I'm excited about can help give me emotional oomph to get into it. And I'm a person that needs that emotional oomph to actually write about something. I cannot write about something I'm not excited about or I'm not interested in. But when I'm researching a new genre, so the first thing I do is don't look at anything else. Sit down with myself, blank piece of paper, go for a walk, get myself a nice hot chocolate, sit outside and just scribble ideas. And what I'm looking for at that point is to find the nugget. So the nugget for my science fiction was nature versus nurture, the nature of creation. So you've got very much kind of like abandoned creator sort of stories going on there. So those are the nuggets. I find lots of those nuggets. With my Gothic horror one, the nugget was sort of this idea of sort of an oppressive, massive world that makes you feel insignificant and small, but then everything's forever. And so the sort of intensity in there, and that was the nugget that I found. And then I kind of just, once I've got I write little ideas and I explore stuff. And because I'm principally a world builder, I kind of explore, well, the questions. If I do this, what comes out of that? And then I'll start to do that sort of a mind map thing. But okay, but once I've done that for a while, I feel like I've got a bit of a grasp of the direction I want to go in. I will then go and have a look at other people's work. I particularly want to have a look at classic stuff that's really popular and probably at least 20 years old. I want to look at that stuff because that stuff is often where modern tropes come from, is that old stuff. And I don't actually get too fixated on reading modern things because, I don't know, if you read it and you compare it to other people's work a little bit too much, you can kind of get caught up in it. And I think you got to have a bit of faith in yourself. I know that sounds really cliche. Believe in yourself. Yeah, a bit of trial and error and having a good perspective on yourself is to identify whether something's good or not. And don't chat to other people. Show what you're doing to other people. I know your friends and family are going to be nice and supportive, so probably find other people that you respect with good opinions, who aren't your friends and family, who aren't invested in your feelings, to give you opinions on what you produce can be a helpful one to see whether you're on the right path. And as long as you're on the right path, go nuts. You know, once you've got your right direction, go as far as you can. It's all about, the hard bit is finding the direction to point. Yeah, I hope that helped. Yeah,
that was really good. Thanks. Yeah, I have a lot of questions about creative writing because I'm more of an analytical writer, but yeah, would like to be better at creative writing as well.
Something that I found interesting is go and find interviews. So writers are actually fantastic at interviews because they're word people. So go and look up, go have a look at George R. Martin, see what he says. Go have a chat to Neil Gaiman, see what Neil Gaiman's got to say on stuff. Just go find these big monolithic people. Go find old, like Frank Herbert, who did Dune, did a bunch of good interviews. Go and listen to them. And the stuff that they say are often really good. Like you can find nuggets of wisdom there and figuring out, that'll help you to figure out how to form your own creative process. Yeah.
Desi says your job is so cool. I don't know if you can see the chat, so I'm like reading it aloud.
I'm seeing a link, but I'm not actually seeing the words up there. Sorry, just thinking about that interview thing. So back in a previous life, I kind of wanted to be a visual artist, but visual artists do really sucky interviews. They're terrible. They're amazing, and they can't articulate why they're amazing. So as writers, you're really good in that regard. So you can find really good people who can articulate why they're really good. Yeah.
That's really good advice. Thanks for that. So was that everything you had to share with us today, Wade?
Oh, sorry, I missed that one.
I said, is that everything you had to share with us today?
Yeah, I think that is.
Yeah, thank you for that. That was really interesting. And I know a lot of people are quite envious of your career. Yeah, we'll share your, we're going to share this recording and your website and socials on the DUELS social media. And hopefully you get some new fans out of today.
Ah, that would be nice.
Would you mind to stop sharing, and I'll just pull up our socials and we'll get people
Yep,
to.
I'm trying to figure out how to do that. That's right. And get my whole boomer tech thing. Okay, let's go stop. Yeah.
You got a techie there with you?
Stop video. Let me.
Okay. So yeah, thank you, Wade. Really happy with what just happened. Okay, sorry, my computer just stuffed up. I'll pull up our slide.
Just real quick, Kaz.
Yeah.
Wade will just be sitting there listening and watching the chat. So if people do think of questions, chuck it in the chat and Wade will be able to answer via the chat. If you just can't think of anything right now, he might be able to answer it while we're going through our stuff as well.
Yeah, sounds good. This will just take 5 minutes, guys, and then we'll be all done. Okay, yeah, okay. Can you guys see that? Where is it? Can you see that? Okay, cool. So I know some of you guys aren't members of DUELS because today was an open event for everyone. And the recording will be available to everyone as well, whether you're a member or not. But we are a new club to Deakin, so we're in the process of finding new members. And we do have a whole year of events coming up that we've planned, which you can see on our socials and you can follow us below. But I just wanted to outline what we've got coming up. Miriam, do you have the prizes with you there that you can hold up?
Yes, I have. What do we got? We've got the Grimm's Fairy Tale there.
Yep, so this is the Folio Society's edition of the Grimm's Fairy Tales. It's valued at $120 and you can win this at our next event, which is a essay writing workshop, which hopefully will be valuable to everyone. It'll be like targeted at heaps of different disciplines. It'll just be like breaking down essays to their most basic forms to improve your writing skills for uni. But at this event, we'll also be kicking off our scavenger hunt by giving the first clue. The scavenger hunt you can do from home. So it doesn't matter what campus you're at. And it'll be basically based on how fast you work through it, but also that there'll be a point system. We're still working out the kinks and stuff, but basically there'll be a bunch of questions and there will be a winner, and the winner will receive this Grimm's Fairy Tales book. And we've also got the Hobbit book set, speaking of Tolkien earlier with Wade, to give away to anyone that's a member of DUELS. And all you have to do is answer a riddle, which is on our socials. And if you answer correctly, you go in the draw to win the Hobbit. And that closes this Sunday. And lastly, we will be at the Warn Ponds Club Showcase tomorrow. I'll be there all day, Andrew will be there in the morning, and Miriam will be there in the afternoon. And we've got some little show bags to give away to members. So whether you've already signed up or you want to come down and meet us and sign up, you can come get your show bag. And yeah, did you guys, Drew or Miriam, did you have anything to add? No, I covered it. Okay, cool. Thanks, guys. Did we have any more questions for Wade? I think I actually had one. No questions for Wade. What was my question? Oh, what is Wade's background in writing like? Did he study it, or was it just like a passion he had on the side? Did he take any classes to better his writing skills? You're muted. I can't hear you.
There you go.
Just passing English at high school.
Yeah.
I think I got a 34 out of 50. I was a very passionate reader. I'm very slow though. I really like words. I'm just not very good at them. So, yeah, I don't know if that's encouraging or disheartening to people.
It's probably good. It takes the pressure off other people, I guess. It proves you don't have to get the perfect scores to build such an awesome career.
Yeah, that's good. I do find like that reading definitely like gets the creative juices flowing for me. I don't know about everyone else, but yeah, that's good advice. So yeah, that was my question. Desi had a question. Oh, for us, would it still be worth signing up if we're on Burwood campus? Yeah, a lot of our events are on the cloud, especially at the moment. We're not actually allowed to run on campus at all. But if you look at our socials, we have a events calendar up, and it's color coded, so you can see which events are cloud-based and which are in person. And if we do gain a lot of traction, we're looking at starting a Burwood chapter later down the track, so you guys can have in-person events as well. And on top of that, we're also looking at externally run events, like just events in Melbourne that we can provide maybe cheaper tickets to for our members, and you know, the Geelong people will come as well and have a little excursion or hang out in the city or something. But yeah, stay tuned, because we're very new and we're trying to find our place at the moment and find what people want. So if you want that, we will look into it as well. We just want everyone to have like a good social time at Jules. Was that all the questions? Nice to meet you too, Desi. Is that everything? No one else? All right, well, thank you for coming, everyone. Like I said, did you say something?
Yeah, sorry. I'm probably on a really long delay because I'm connected to my phone, not on Wi-Fi.
Okay.
But I just want to say thanks to the Tabletop Society. We reached out and it's really good to see you here. We hope you enjoyed it and it was helpful to your passions. So thanks for coming, and thanks everyone else for coming as well. Obviously it's really scary being a new club and starting new events and things like that. So we really appreciate you.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. Thanks for coming, guys. We'll put this recording up, and yeah, if you want to get in touch with Wade, we'll put up his details to his socials and stuff. And yeah, thanks for that, guys.